Muhammad Ali, born Cassius Marcellus Clay Jr., January 17, 1942, is an American former professional boxer, generally considered among the greatest heavyweights in the sport's history. A controversial and polarizing figure during his early career, Ali is today widely regarded for not only the skills he displayed in the ring, but also the values he exemplified outside of it: religious freedom, racial justice, and the triumph of principle over expedience. He is one of the most recognized sports figures of the past 100 years, crowned Sportsman of the Century by Sports Illustrated and Sports Personality of the Century by the BBC. Born Cassius Clay, at the age of 22 he won the World Heavyweight Championship in 1964 from Sonny Liston in a stunning upset. Shortly after that bout, Ali joined the Nation of Islam and changed his name. He subsequently converted to Sunni Islam in 1975. In 1967, 3 years after winning the heavyweight title, Ali refused to be conscripted into the U.S. military, citing his religious beliefs and opposition to the Vietnam War. He was eventually arrested and found guilty on draft evasion charges, and stripped of his boxing title. He did not fight again for nearly 4 years, losing a time of peak performance in an athlete's career. Ali's appeal worked its way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, where in 1971 his conviction was overturned. Ali's actions as a conscientious objector to the war made him an icon for the larger counterculture generation. Ali remains the only 3-time lineal world heavyweight champion. He won the title in 1964, 1974, and 1978. Nicknamed the Greatest, Ali was involved in several historic boxing matches. Notable among these were the first Liston fight, 3 with rival Joe Frazier, and 1 with George Foreman, where he regained titles he had been stripped of 7 years earlier. Ali revolutionized the sport of boxing by sheer power and magnetism of his personality at a time when most fighters let their managers do the talking. Ali thrived in, and indeed craved, the spotlight, where he was sometimes provocative, frequently outlandish, and almost always entertaining. He controlled most press conferences and interviews, and spoke freely about issues unrelated to boxing. He transformed the role and image of the African American athlete in America by his embrace of racial pride and his willingness to antagonize the white establishment in doing so. In the words of writer Joyce Carol Oates, he was one of the few athletes in any sport to completely define the terms of his public reputation. Early life and amateur career. Cassius Marcellus Clay Jr. was born on January 17, 1942, in Louisville, Kentucky. Unlike many boxers, he was raised in a supportive, African-American middle-class family. The eldest of 2 boys, he was named after his father, Cassius Marcellus Clay Sr., who himself was named after the 19th-century abolitionist and politician of the same name. His father painted billboards and signs, and his mother, Odessa O'Grady Clay, was a household domestic. Although Cassius Sr. was a Methodist, he allowed Odessa to bring up both Cassius and his younger brother Rudolph Rudy Clay, later renamed Rahman Ali, as Baptists. He is a descendant of pre-Civil War era American slaves in the American South, and is predominantly of African American descent, with Irish and English ancestry. He was first directed toward boxing by Louisville police officer and boxing coach Joey Martin, who encountered the 12-year-old fuming over a thief taking his bicycle. He told the officer he was going to WHUP the thief. The officer told him he better learn how to box first. For the last 4 years of Clay's amateur career he was trained by boxing cutman Chuck Bodak. Clay won 6 Kentucky Golden Gloves titles, 2 National Golden Gloves titles, an Amateur Athletic Union national title, and the light heavyweight gold medal in the 1960 Summer Olympics in Rome. Clay's amateur record was 100 wins with 5 losses. Shortly after his return home from Rome following the Olympics, Ollie would claim in his 1975 autobiography that he threw his medal into the Ohio River after he and a friend of his were being refused service at a whites-only restaurant and fighting with the white gang. The story has since been heavily debated, and several of Ollie's friends from photographer Howard Bingham to Budini Brown denied it. Brown later told Sports Illustrated writer Mark Cram, "Hunky's sure bought into that one." Thomas Hauser's biography of Ollie confirmed that Ollie was refused service at the diner, but that he lost his medal a year after he won it. Ollie later received a replacement medal at a basketball intermission during the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta, where he lit the torch to start the games. Professional boxing. Early career. Clay made his professional debut on October 29, 1960, winning a 6-round decision over Tony Hunsaker. From then until the end of 1963, Clay amassed a record of 19-0, with 15 wins by knockout. He defeated boxers including Tony Esperty, Jim Robinson, Donnie Fleeman, Alonzo Johnson, George Logan, Willie Besmanoff, Lamar Clark, Doug Jones, and Henry Cooper. Clay also beat his former trainer and veteran boxer Archie Moore in a 1962 match. These early fights were not without trials. Clay was knocked down both by Sonny Banks and Cooper. In the Cooper fight, Clay was floored by a vicious left hook at the end of round 4 and was saved by the bell. The fight with Doug Jones on March 13, 1963, was Clay's toughest fight during this stretch. The number 2 and 3 heavyweight contenders respectively, Clay and Jones fought on Jones' home turf at New York's Madison Square Garden. Jones staggered Clay the first round, and the unanimous decision for Clay was greeted by boos and a rain of debris thrown onto the ring. Watching on closed-circuit TV, heavyweight champ Sonny Liston quit that if he fought Clay he might get locked up for murder. The fight was later named Fight of the Year. In each of these fights, Clay vocally belittled his opponents and vaunted his abilities. Jones was an ugly little man, Cooper was a bum. He was embarrassed to get in the ring with Alex Mateff. Madison Square Garden was too small for me. This audacious behavior, unlike that of any fighter in recent memory, made him controversial and disliked by most writers, many former champions, and much of the general public. After Clay left Moore's camp in 1960, partially due to Clay's refusing to do chores such as dishwashing and sweeping, he hired Angelo Dundee, whom he had met in February 1957, during Ollie's amateur career, to be his trainer. Around this time, Clay sought longtime idol Sugar Ray Robinson to be his manager, but was rebuffed. Heavyweight champion. By late 1963, Clay had become the top contender for Sonny Liston's title. The fight was set for February 25, 1964, in Miami. Liston was an intimidating personality, a dominating fighter with a criminal past and ties to the mob. Based on Clay's uninspired performance against Jones and Cooper in his previous 2 fights, and Liston's destruction of former heavyweight champion Floyd Patterson in 2 first-round knockouts, Clay was a 7-1 underdog. Despite this, Clay taunted Liston during the pre-fight build-up, dubbing him the Big Ugly Bear. "Liston even smells like a bear," Clay said. "After I beat him I'm going to donate him to the zoo." He declared that he would float like a butterfly and sting like a bee, and, summarizing his strategy for avoiding Liston's assaults, said, "Your hands can't hit what your eyes can't see." Clay turned the pre-fight weigh-in into a circus, shouting at Liston that someone is going to die at ringside tonight. Nothing like this had ever occurred in the history of boxing. Clay's pulse rate was around 120, more than double his norm of 54. Most of those in attendance, apparently including Liston, thought Clay's behavior stemmed from extreme fear. Some commentators wondered if he would even show up for the bout. The outcome of the fight was one of the biggest upsets in boxing history. At the opening bell, Liston rushed at Clay, seemingly angry, and looking for a quick knockout. But Clay's superior speed and mobility enabled him to elude Liston, making the champion miss wildly and look awkward. At the end of the first round, Clay opened up his attack and hit Liston repeatedly with sharp jabs to the amazement of the crowd. Liston fought better in round 2, but at the beginning of the third round Clay hit Liston with a combination that buckled his knees and opened a cut under his left eye, the first time Liston had ever been cut. Clay rested in round 4, but as he came to his corner at the end of the round, he began experiencing blinding pain in his eyes and asked his trainer Angelo Dundee to cut off his gloves. Dundee refused. It has been speculated that the problem was due to ointment used to seal Liston's cuts, perhaps deliberately applied by his corner to his gloves. Though not confirmed, Bert Sugar claimed that at least 2 of Liston's opponents also complained about their eyes burning. Despite Liston's attempts to knock out a blinded Clay was able to survive the 5th round until sweat and tears rinsed the irritation from his eyes. In the 6th, Clay dominated, hitting Liston virtually at will. Liston did not answer the bell for the 7th round, and Clay was declared the winner by TKO. Liston stated that the reason he quit was an injured shoulder. Following the win, a triumphant Clay rushed to the edge of the ring and, pointing to the ringside press, shouted, "Eat your words." Then, during the now infamous in-ring interview following the match, Clay shouted, "I shook up the world. I talk to God every day. I must be the greatest." When Clay won, he became the youngest boxer, 22 years old, to take the title from a reigning heavyweight champion, though Floyd Patterson was the youngest to win the heavyweight championship, at 21, during an elimination bout following Rocky Marciano's retirement. Mike Tyson broke both records in 1986 when he defeated Trevor Berbick to win the heavyweight title at age 20. Clay, now having changed his name to Muhammad Ali following his conversion to Islam and affiliation with the Nation of Islam, met Liston for a rematch in May 1965 in Lewiston, Maine. Originally scheduled for Boston the previous November, it was delayed due to Ali's emergency surgery for a hernia 3 days before. Postponed 6 months, the fight proved to be as controversial as the first was shocking. Midway through the first round, Liston was knocked down by a punch later dubbed by the press as the Phantom Punch, because no one saw it. Ali refused to retreat to a neutral corner, and referee Jersey Joe Walcott did not begin the count. Liston rose after he had been down about 20 seconds, and the fight momentarily continued. But suddenly Walcott reversed himself and stopped the match, declaring Ali the winner by knockout. The entire fight lasted less than 2 minutes. Rumors circulated almost immediately after the fight, and continue to this day, that Liston dropped to the ground purposely. Various reasons include threats on his life from the Nation of Islam, that he had bet against himself, and that he took a dive to pay off debts. Slow-motion replays show that Liston was jarred by a chopping right from Ali, although it is uncertain whether the blow was a genuine knockout punch. Ali's second title defense was against Floyd Patterson, former heavyweight champion, who had lost twice to Liston in first-round knockouts. Patterson had made what Ali considered denigrating remarks about his religion. Ali dubbed Patterson a white man's champion, and taunted him with the name Rabbit. At times during the fight, Ali appeared to toy with Patterson, refusing, for example, to throw a single punch in the first round, and easily avoiding Patterson's lunging kangaroo punch. Some felt Ali deliberately prolonged the fight to inflict maximum punishment. Ali won a 12-round TKO. Patterson later said that he strained his acroiliac, a statement supported by video of the fight. The clowning and taunting of Patterson was criticized by many in the sports media. Ali and then WBA heavyweight champion boxer Ernie Terrell had agreed to meet for a bout in Chicago on March 29, 1966. The WBA, one of 2 boxing associations, had stripped Ali of his title following his joining the Nation of Islam. But in February Ali was reclassified by the Louisville Draft Board as 1A from 1Y, and he indicated that he would refuse to serve, commenting to the press, "I got nothing against them Viet Cong." Amidst the media and public outcry over Ali's stance, the Illinois Athletic Commission refused to host the fight, citing technicalities. Instead, Ali traveled to Canada and Europe, and won championship bouts against George Chuvalo, Henry Cooper, Brian London, and Carl Mildenberger. Ali returned to the United States to fight Cleveland Williams in the Houston Astrodome. According to Sports Illustrated, the bout drew an indoor world record of 35,460. Williams had once been considered among the hardest punchers in the heavyweight division, but in 1964 he had been shot at point-blank range by a Texas policeman, resulting in the loss of one kidney and 10 feet (3.0 m) of his small intestine. Ali dominated Williams, winning a third-round TKO in what some consider the finest boxing exhibition of his career. Ali and Terrell finally met in Houston on February 6, 1967. Terrell was considered Ali's toughest opponent since Liston, unbeaten in 5 years, and having defeated many of the boxers Ali had faced. Terrell was big, strong, and had a 3-inch reach advantage over Ali. During the lead-up to the bout, Terrell repeatedly called Ali Clay, much to Ali's annoyance. Ali called Cassius Clay his slave name. The two almost came to blows over the point in a pre-fight interview with Howard Cosell. Ali seemed intent on humiliating Terrell. "I want to torture him," he said. "A clean knockout is too good for him." The fight was close until the 7th round, when Ali bloodied Terrell and almost knocked him out. In the 8th round, Ali taunted Terrell, hitting him with sharp jabs, and shouting between punches, "What's my name, Uncle Tom, what's my name?" Ali was unable to knock out Terrell, winning a unanimous 15-round decision. Terrell claimed that early in the fight Ali deliberately thumped him, forcing Terrell to fight with one eye, and then, in a clinch, rubbed the wounded eye against the ropes. Because of Ali's apparent intent to prolong the fight to inflict maximum punishment, critics described the bout as one of the ugliest boxing fights. Tex Small later wrote, "It was a wonderful demonstration of boxing skill, and a barbarous display of cruelty." Ali denied he intended to harm Terrell on purpose, nor did he feel he was cruel to him during the bout. But for Ali's critics, the fight provided still more evidence of his arrogance. After his title defense against Zoraf Ali on March 22, Ali's title was stripped following his refusal to be drafted to Army service on April 28. His boxing license was also immediately suspended by the state of New York. He was convicted on June 20 by an all-white jury, and sentenced to 5 years in prison and a $10,000 fine for draft evasion. While his case was on appeal, he was free on posted bond, and served no jail time. Exile and comeback. Ali refused to be inducted into the armed forces, stating publicly that, "No Viet Cong ever called me nigger." He was systematically denied the boxing license in every state, and stripped of his passport. As a result, he did not fight from March 1967 to October 1970, from ages 25 to almost 29 as his case worked its way through the appeal process. In 1971, the U.S. Supreme Court overturned his conviction, in a unanimous 8-0 ruling. Thurgood Marshall abstained from the case. During this time of inactivity, as opposition to the Vietnam War began to grow and Ali's stance gained sympathy, he spoke at colleges across the nation, criticizing the Vietnam War, and advocating African American pride and racial justice. On August 12, 1970, with his case still in appeal in 1970, Ali was granted a license on August 12 to box by the City of Atlanta Athletic Commission, thanks to State Senator Leroy R. Johnson. Ali's first return bout was against Jerry Corey on October 26, resulting in a win, after 3 rounds, after Corey was cut. A month earlier, a victory in federal court forced the New York State Boxing Commission to reinstate Ali's license. He fought Oscar Bonavena at Madison Square Garden in December, an uninspired performance that ended in a dramatic TKO of Bonavena in the 15th round. The win left Ali as a top contender against heavyweight champion Joe Frazier. Ali and Frazier's first fight, held at the Garden on March 8, 1971, was nicknamed the fight of the century due to the tremendous excitement surrounding a bout between two undefeated fighters, each with a legitimate claim as heavyweight champions. Veteran boxing writer John Condon called it the greatest event I've ever worked on in my life. The bout was broadcast to 35 foreign countries. Promoters granted 760 press passes. Adding to the atmosphere were the considerable pre-fight theatrics and name-calling. Ali portrayed Frazier as a dumb to love the white establishment. "Frazier is too ugly to be champ," Ali said. "Frazier is too dumb to be champ." Ali also frequently called Frazier an Uncle Tom. Dave Wolf, who worked in Frazier's camp, recalled that Ali was saying, "The only people rooting for Joe Frazier are white people in suits, Alabama sheriffs, and members of the Ku Klux Klan. I'm fighting for the little man in the ghetto." Joe was sitting there smashing his fist into the palm of his hand, saying, "What the fuck does he know about the ghetto?" The Monday night fight lived up to its billing. In a preview of their two other fights, a crouching, bobbing, and weaving Frazier constantly pressured Ali, getting hit regularly by Ali jabs and combinations, but relentlessly attacking and scoring repeatedly, especially to Ali's body. The fight was even in the early rounds, but Ali was taking more punishment than ever in his career. On several occasions in the early rounds he played to the crowd and shook his head no after he was hit. In the later rounds, in what was the first appearance of the rope-a-dope strategy, Ali leaned against the ropes and absorbed punishment from Frazier, hoping to tire him. In the 11th round, Frazier connected with a left hook that wobbled Ali, but, because it appeared that Ali might be clowning as he staggered backwards across the ring, Frazier hesitated to press his advantage, fearing an Ali counterattack. In the final round, Frazier knocked Ali down with a vicious left hook, which referee Arthur Mercanti said was as hard as a man can be hit. Ali was back on his feet in 3 seconds. Nevertheless, Ali lost by unanimous decision, his first professional defeat. Ali's characterizations of Frazier during the lead-up to the fight cemented a personal animosity toward Ali by Frazier that lasted until Frazier's death. Frazier and his camp always considered Ali's words cruel and unfair, far beyond what was necessary to sell tickets. Shortly after the bout, in the studios of ABC's Wide World of Sports, during a nationally televised interview with the two boxers, Frazier rose from his chair and wrestled Ali to the floor, after Ali called him ignorant. After the loss, Ali fought Corey, a second bout with Floyd Patterson and Bob Foster, in 1972, winning a total of 6 fights that year. In 1973, Ali suffered the second loss of his career at the hands of Ken Norton, who broke Ali's jaw during the fight. After initially seeking retirement, Ali won a controversial decision against Norton in their second bout, leading to a rematch at Madison Square Garden on January 28, 1974, with Joe Frazier, who had recently lost his title to George Foreman. Ali was strong in the early rounds of the fight and staggered Frazier. In the second round, referee Tony Perez mistakenly thought he heard the bell ending the round and stepped between the two fighters as Ali was pressing his attack, giving Frazier time to recover. However, Frazier came on in the middle rounds, snapping Ali's head in round 7 and driving him to the ropes at the end of round 8. The last 4 rounds saw round-to-round shifts in momentum between the two fighters. Throughout most of the bout, however, Ali was able to circle away from Frazier's dangerous left hook and to tie Frazier up when he was cornered, the latter a tactic that Frazier's camp complained of bitterly. Judges awarded Ali a unanimous decision. Heavyweight champion, second tenure. The defeat of Frazier set the stage for a title fight against heavyweight champion George Foreman in Kinshasa, Zaire, on October 30, 1974, about nicknamed the Rumble in the Jungle. Foreman was considered one of the hardest punchers in heavyweight history. In assessing the fight, analysts pointed out that Joe Frazier and Ken Norton, who had given Ali 4 tough battles and won 2 of them, had been both devastated by Foreman in second-round knockouts. Ali was 32 years old and had clearly lost speed and reflexes since his 20s. Contrary to his later persona, Foreman was at the time a brooding and intimidating presence. Almost no one associated with the sport, not even Ali's longtime supporter Howard Cosell, gave the former champion a chance of winning. As usual, Ali was confident and colorful before the fight. He told interviewer David Frost, "If you think the world was surprised when Nixon resigned, wait till IWHUP Foreman's behind." He told the press, "I've done something new for this fight. I done wrestled with an alligator, I done tussled with a whale, handcuffed lightning, thrown thunder in jail. Only last week, I murdered a rock, injured a stone, hospitalized a brick. I'm so mean I make medicine sick." Ali was wildly popular in Zaire, with crowds chanting Ali, Bomb Ali, kill him, wherever he went. Ali opened the fight moving and scoring with right cross to Foreman's head. Then, beginning in the second round, and to the consternation of his corner, Ali retreated to the ropes and invited Foreman to hit him while covering up, clenching and counter-punching, all while verbally taunting Foreman. "Is that all you got, George? They told me you could hit." The move, which would later become known as the rope-a-dope, so violated conventional boxing wisdom, letting one of the hardest hitters in boxing strike at will. That at ringside writer George Plimpton thought the fight had to be fixed. Foreman, increasingly angered, threw punches that were deflected and didn't land squarely. Midway through the fight, as Foreman began tiring, Ali countered more frequently and effectively with punches and flurries, which electrified the pro-Ali crowd. In the eighth, Ali dropped an exhausted Foreman with a combination at center ring. Foreman failed to make the count. Against the odds, and amidst pandemonium in the ring, Ali had regained the title by knockout. President Jimmy Carter greets Muhammad Ali at a White House dinner, 1977. In reflecting on the fight, George Foreman later said, "I'll admit it. Muhammad outthought me and outfought me." Ali's next opponents included Chuck Wepner, Ron Lyle, and Joe Bugner. Wepner, a journeyman known as the Bayonne Bleeder, stunned Ali with a knockdown in the ninth round. Ali would later say he tripped on Wepner's foot. Ali then agreed to a third match with Joe Frazier in Manila. The bout, titled The Thrilla in Manila, was held on October 1, 1975, in temperatures approaching 100 F, 38 C. In the first rounds, Ali was aggressive, moving and exchanging blows with Frazier. However, Ali soon appeared to tire and adopted the rope-a-dope strategy, frequently resorting to clinches. During this part of the bout, Ali did some effective counter-punching, but for the most part absorbed punishment from a relentlessly attacking Frazier. In the 12th round, Frazier began to tire, and Ali scored several sharp blows that closed Frazier's left eye and opened a cut over his right eye. With Frazier's vision now diminished, Ali dominated the 13th and 14th rounds, at times conducting what boxing historian Mike Silver called target practice on Frazier's head. Still, at the end of the 14th round, Frazier was still standing and Ali appeared exhausted. The fight was stopped when Frazier's trainer, Eddie Futch, refused to allow Frazier to answer the bell for the 15th and final round, despite Frazier's protests. Frazier's eyes were both swollen shut. Ali, in his corner, winner by TKO, slumped on his stool, clearly spent. And yelling, Ali said afterwards that the fight was the closest thing to dying that I know, and, when later asked if he had viewed the fight on videotape, reportedly said, "Why would I want to go back and see hell?" After the fight he cited Frazier as the greatest fighter of all times next to me. Decline. Ali being interviewed by WBAL-TV's Kurt Anderson, 1978, Baltimore, Maryland. Following the Manila bout, Ali fought Jean-Pierre Koopman, Jimmy Young, and Richard Dunn, winning the last by knockout. Later in 1976, Ali participated in an exhibition bout in Tokyo against Japanese professional wrestler and martial artist Antonio Inoki. Though the fight was a publicity stunt, Ali suffered leg bruises, 2 blood clots, and an infection in his legs due to Inoki's kicks. The fight was ultimately declared a draw. Ali fought Ken Norton for the third time at Yankee Stadium in September 1976, where Ali won by a heavily contested decision, which was loudly booed by the audience. Ali reacted to the fallout of this by announcing a brief retirement to practice his faith in Islam, having converted to Sunni Islam after falling out with the Nation of Islam the previous year. After winning against Alfredo Evangelista in May 1977, Ali struggled in his next fight against Ernie Shavers that September, who pummeled Ali a few times with punches to the head. Ali won the fight by another unanimous decision, but the bout caused Ali's longtime doctor Fardeep Pacheco to quit after he was rebuffed for telling Ali he should retire. Pacheco was quoted as saying, "The New York State Athletic Commission gave me a report that showed Ali's kidneys were falling apart. I wrote to Angelo Dundee, Ali's trainer, his wife, and Ali himself. I got nothing back in response. That's when I decided enough is enough." In February 1978, Ali faced Leon Spinks at the Superdome in New Orleans. At the time, Spinks had only 7 professional fights to his credit, and had recently fought a draw with journeyman Scott Ledoux. Ali sparred less than 24 rounds in preparation for the fight, and was seriously out of shape by the opening bell. He lost the title by unanimous decision. A rematch followed shortly thereafter in New Orleans, which broke attendance records. Ali won a unanimous decision in an uninspiring fight, making him the first heavyweight champion to win the belt 3 times. Following this win, on July 27, 1979, Ali announced his retirement from boxing. His retirement was short-lived, however. Ali announced his comeback to face Larry Holmes for the WBA belt in an attempt to win the heavyweight championship an unprecedented 4th time. The fight was largely motivated by Ali's need for money. Boxing writer Richie Giacchetti said, "Larry didn't want to fight Ali. He knew Ali had nothing left, he knew it would be a horror." It was around this time that Ali started struggling with vocal stutters and trembling hands. The Nevada Athletic Commission, NAC, ordered that he undergo a complete physical in Las Vegas before being allowed to fight again. Ali chose instead to check into the Mayo Clinic, who declared him fit to fight. Their opinion was accepted by the NAC on July 31, 1980, paving the way for Ali's return to the ring. The fight took place on October 2, 1980, in Las Vegas, with Holmes easily dominating Ali, who was weakened from thyroid medication he had taken to lose weight. Giacchetti called the fight awful, the worst sports event I ever had to cover. Actor Sylvester Stallone at ringside said, "It was like watching an autopsy on a man who is still alive." Ali's trainer Angelo Dundee finally stopped the fight in the 11th round, the only fight Ali lost by knockout. The Holmes fight is said to have contributed to Ali's Parkinson's syndrome. Despite pleas to definitively retire, Ali fought one last time on December 11, 1981, in Nassau against Trevor Berbick, losing a 10-round decision. Later years. Muhammad Ali. Ali was diagnosed with Parkinson's syndrome in 1984, a disease that is common to head trauma from activities such as boxing. Ali still remained active during this time, however, later participating as a guest referee in the inaugural WrestleMania event. President Reagan punching Muhammad Ali in the Oval Office, 1983. Around 1987, the California Bicentennial Foundation for the U.S. Constitution selected Ali to personify the vitality of the U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights. Ali rode on a float at the following year's Tournament of Roses parade, launching the U.S. Constitution's 200th birthday commemoration. He published an oral history, Muhammad Ali, His Life and Times by Thomas Hauser, in 1991. That same year Ali traveled to Iraq during the Gulf War and met with Saddam Hussein in an attempt to negotiate the release of American hostages. In 1996, he had the honor of lighting the flame at the 1996 Summer Olympics in Atlanta, Georgia. Ali's bout with Parkinson's led to a gradual decline in Ali's health, though he was still active into the early years of the millennium, even promoting his own biopic, Ali, in 2001. Ali also contributed an on-camera segment to the America, a Tribute to Heroes benefit concert, on November 17, 2002, Muhammad Ali went to Afghanistan as the UN messenger of peace. He was in Kabul for a 3-day goodwill mission as a special guest of the UN. On September 1, 2009, Ali visited Ennis, County Clare, Ireland, the home of his great-grandfather, Abe Grady, who immigrated to the U.S. in the 1860s, eventually settling in Kentucky. A crowd of 10,000 turned out for a civic reception, where Ali was made the first honorary freeman of Ennis. On July 27, 2012, Ali was a titular bearer of the Olympic flag during the opening ceremonies of the 2012 Summer Olympics in London. He was helped to his feet by his wife Lonnie to stand before the flag due to his Parkinson's rendering him unable to carry it into the stadium. On February 3, 2013, in a Washington Times article, Ali's brother, Rahman Ali, said Muhammad can no longer speak and could be dead within days. Ali's daughter, Maymay Ali, responded to rumors of her father being near death, stating that she had talked to him on the phone the morning of February 3 and he was fine. Personal life. Marriages and children. Ali has been married 4 times and has 7 daughters and 2 sons. Ali met his first wife, cocktail waitress Angie Roy, approximately 1 month before they married on August 14, 1964. Roy's objections to certain Muslim customs in regard to dress for women contributed to the breakup of their marriage. They divorced on January 10, 1966. On August 17, 1967, Ali married Belinda Boyd. After the wedding, she, like Ali, converted to Islam, and more recently to Sufism, changed her name to Khalila Ali, though she was still called Belinda by old friends and family. They had 4 children. Maryam, b. 1968, twins Hamioya and Rashida, b. 1970, and Muhammad Ali Jr., b. 1972. Maryam has a career as an author and rapper. In 1975, Ali began an affair with Veronica Portia, an actress and model. By the summer of 1977, Ali's second marriage was over and he had married Veronica. At the time of their marriage, they had a baby girl, Hannah, and Veronica was pregnant with their second child. Their second daughter, Layla, was born in December 1977. By 1986, Ali and Veronica were divorced. Layla later became a boxer in 1999, despite her father's earlier comments against female boxing. In 1978, women are not made to be hit in the breast and face like that. The body's not made to be punched right here, patting his chest. Get hit in the breast, hard, and all that. As of 2014, Layla is undefeated in the super middleweight category, with 24 wins, no losses, and no draws. On November 19, 1986, Ali married Yolanda Lonnie Williams. They had been friends since 1964, in Louisville. They have 1 son, Asad Amin, whom they adopted when Amin was 5 months old. Ali was a resident of Cherry Hill, New Jersey, in the early 1970s. Ali has 2 other daughters, Mia and Kalia, from extramarital relationships. Ali currently lives in Scottsdale, Arizona with Lonnie. In January 2007 it was reported that they had put their home in Berrien Springs, Michigan, up for sale, and had purchased a home in eastern Jefferson County, Kentucky, for $1,875,000. Lonnie converted to Islam from Catholicism in her late 20s. The Nation of Islam and Religious Beliefs. Ali at an address by Elijah Muhammad. Ali said that he first heard of the Nation of Islam when he was fighting in the Golden Gloves tournament in Chicago in 1959, and attended his first NOI meeting in 1961. He continued to attend meetings, although keeping his involvement hidden from the public. In 1962, Clay met Malcolm X, who soon became his spiritual and political mentor, and by the time of the first list and fight NOI members, including Malcolm X, were visible in his entourage. This led to a story in the Miami Herald just before fight disclosing that Clay had joined the Nation, which nearly caused the bout to be cancelled. In fact, Clay was initially refused entry to the Nation of Islam, often called the Black Muslims, at the time, due to his boxing career. However, after he won the championship from Liston in 1964, the Nation of Islam was more receptive and agreed to recruit him as a member. Shortly afterwards, Elijah Muhammad recorded a statement that Clay would be renamed Muhammad I, who is worthy of praise, Ali, forthrightly guided Caliph. Only a few journalists, most notably Howard Cosell, accepted the new name at that time. Ali later announced that Cassius Clay is my slave name. Ali's friendship with Malcolm X soon ended as Malcolm split with the NOI a couple of weeks after Ali joined, and Ali remained with the Nation. Ali later said that turning his back on Malcolm was one of the mistakes he regretted most in his life. Aligning himself with the Nation of Islam, its leader Elijah Muhammad, and a pseudo-history that labeled the white race as the perpetrator of genocide against African Americans made Ali a target of public condemnation. The NOI was widely viewed by whites, and even some African Americans, as a black separatist hate religion with a propensity toward violence. Ali had few qualms about using his influential voice to speak NOI doctrine. For example, in a press conference articulating his opposition to the Vietnam War, Ali stated, "My enemy is the white people, not the Viet Cong." In relation to integration, he said, "We who follow the teachings of Elijah Muhammad don't want to be forced to integrate. Integration is wrong. We don't want to live with a white man, that's all." And in relation to interracial marriage, no intelligent black man or black woman in his or her right black mind wants white boys and white girls coming to their homes to marry their black sons and daughters. Indeed, Ali's religious beliefs at the time included the notion that the white man was the devil and that white people were not righteous. Writer Jerry Eisenberg once noted that the Nation became Ali's family and Elijah Muhammad became his father. But there is an irony to the fact that while the Nation branded white people as devils, Ali had more white colleagues than most African American people did at that time in America, and continued to have them throughout his career. Ali converted from the Nation of Islam sect to mainstream Sunni Islam in 1975. In a 2004 autobiography written with daughter Hannah Yasmin Ali, Muhammad Ali attributes his conversion to the shift toward Islam made by Warithdin Muhammad after he gained control of the Nation of Islam upon the death of Elijah Muhammad in 1975. Later in 2005 he embraced spiritual practices of Sufism. Vietnam War and resistance to the draft. In 1964, Ali failed the U.S. Armed Forces qualifying test because his writing and spelling skills were subpar. He was quoted as saying, "I said I was the greatest, not the smartest." However, in early 1966, the tests were revised and Ali was reclassified as 1A. This classification meant he was now eligible for the draft and induction into the U.S. Army during a time when the United States was involved in the Vietnam War. When notified of this status, Ali declared that he would refuse to serve in the United States Army and publicly considered himself a conscientious objector. Ali stated, "War is against the teachings of the Holy Quran. I'm not trying to dodge the draft. We are not supposed to take part in no wars unless declared by Allah or the Messenger. We don't take part in Christian wars or wars of any unbelievers." More succinctly and famously he said, "I ain't got no quarrel with them Viet Cong," words that articulated for a generation of young Americans a reason to oppose the war. Appearing for his scheduled induction into the U.S. Armed Forces on April 28, 1967, in Houston, Ali refused 3 times to step forward at the call of his name. An officer warned him he was committing a felony punishable by 5 years in prison and a fine of $10,000. Once more, Ali refused to budge when his name was called. As a result, he was arrested. On the same day the New York State Athletic Commission suspended his boxing license and stripped him of his title. Other boxing commissions followed suit. Ali would not be able to obtain license to box in any state for over 3 years. At the trial on June 20, 1967, after only 21 minutes of deliberation, the jury found Ali guilty. After a court of appeals upheld the conviction, the case went to the U.S. Supreme Court. In the years between the appellate court decision and the Supreme Court verdict, Ali remained free. As public opinion began turning against the war, and the civil rights movement continued to gather momentum, Ali became a popular speaker at colleges and universities across the country, rare if not unprecedented for a boxer. At Howard University, for example, he gave his popular Black is Best speech to 4,000 cheering students and community intellectuals after he was invited to speak by sociology professor Nathan Hare on behalf of the Black Power Committee, a student protest group 87. On June 28, 1971, the Supreme Court in Clavey, United States overturned Ali's conviction by a unanimous 8-0 decision. Justice Thurgood Marshall did not participate. The decision was not based on, nor did it address, the merits of Ali's claims per se. Rather, the court held that since the appeal board gave no reason for the denial of a conscientious objector exemption to Ali, and that it was therefore impossible to determine which of the three basic tests for conscientious objector status offered in the Justice Department's brief that the appeals board relied on, Ali's conviction must be reversed. Impact of Ali's stance. Ali's example inspired countless Black Americans and others. New York Times columnist William Roden wrote that, "Ali's actions changed my standard of what constituted an athlete's greatness. Possessing a killer jump shot, or the ability to stop on a dime was no longer enough. What were you doing for the liberation of your people? What were you doing to help your country live up to the covenant of its founding principles?" Recalling Ali's anti-war position, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar said, "I remember the teachers at my high school didn't like Ali because he was so anti-establishment, and he kind of thumbed his nose at authority and got away with it. The fact that he was proud to be a Black man, and that he had so much talent, made some people think that he was dangerous. But for those very reasons I enjoyed him." Ali inspired Martin Luther King Jr., who had been reluctant to address the Vietnam War for fear of alienating the Johnson administration and its support of the civil rights agenda. Now, King began to voice his own opposition to the war for the first time. In speaking of the cost on Ali's career of his refusal to be drafted, his trainer Angelo Dundee said, "One thing must be taken into account. When talking about Ali, he was robbed of his best years, his prime years." See comment below. In the media and popular culture about the Trials of Muhammad Ali film documentary which explores this Vietnam draft issue. NSA monitoring of Ali's communications. In a secret operation codenamed Minaret, the National Security Agency, NSA, monitored the communications of leading Americans, including Ali, Senators Frank Church and Howard Baker, Dr. Martin Luther King, prominent U.S. journalists who criticized the U.S. war in Vietnam. A review by NSA of the NSA's Minaret program concluded that Minaret was disreputable if not outright illegal. Quotes about Vietnam War man. "I ain't got no quarrel with them Viet Cong. No, I am not going 10,000 miles to help murder, kill, and burn other people to simply help continue the domination of white slave masters over dark people the world over. This is the day and age when such evil and injustice must come to an end. Why should they ask me to put on a uniform and go 10,000 miles from home and drop bombs and bullets on brown people in Vietnam, while so-called Negro people in Louisville are treated like dogs and denied simple human rights? My enemy is the white people, not the Viet Cong. You're my opposer when I want freedom. You're my opposer when I want justice. You're my opposer when I want equality. You won't even stand up for me in America because of my religious beliefs, and do you want me to go somewhere and fight when you won't even stand up for my religious beliefs at home?" Boxing style. Muhammad Ali's boxing gloves are preserved in the Smithsonian Institution National Museum of American History. Ali had a highly unorthodox boxing style for a heavyweight, epitomized by his catchphrase "float like a butterfly, sting like a bee." Never an overpowering puncher, Ali relied early in his career on his superior hand speed, superb reflexes, and constant movement, dancing and circling opponents for most of the fight, holding his hands low and lashing out with a quick, cutting left jab that he threw from a number of angles. His footwork was so strong that it was extremely difficult for opponents to cut down the ring and corner Ali against the ropes. One of Ali's greatest tricks was to make opponents overcommit by pulling straight backward from punches. Disciplined, world-class boxers chased Ali and threw themselves off balance attempting to hit him because he seemed to be an open target, only missing and leaving themselves exposed to Ali's counterpunches, usually a chopping right. Slow-motion replays show that this was precisely the way Sonny Liston was hit and apparently knocked out by Ali in their second fight. Ali often flaunted his movement and dancing with the Ali shuffle, a sort of center ring jig. Ali's early style was so unusual that he was initially discounted because he reminded boxing writers of a lightweight, and it was assumed he would be vulnerable to big hitters like Sonny Liston. Ali probably had the fastest hand and foot speed ever seen in a big fighter. Using a synchronizer, Jimmy Jacobs, who co-managed Mike Tyson, measured young Ali's punching speed versus Sugar Ray Robinson, the welter/middleweight, often considered the best pound-for-pound fighter in history. Ali was 25% faster than Robinson, even though Ali was 45-50 pounds heavier. No matter what his opponents heard about him, they didn't realize how fast he was until they got in the ring with him, Jacobs said. The effect of Ali's punches was cumulative. Ali would rub you out, said Floyd Patterson. He would hit you 14,000 times, and he wouldn't knock you out, he rubbed you out. Charlie Powell, who fought Ali early in Ali's career, and was knocked out in the third round, said, "When he first hit me I said to myself, I can take two of these to get one in myself. But in a little while I found myself getting dizzier and dizzier every time he hit me. He throws punches so easily that you don't realize how much they hurt you until it's too late." Commenting on fighting Ali in his prime, George Chuvalo said, "He was just so damn fast. When he was young, he moved his legs and hands at the same time. He threw his punches when he was in motion. He'd be out of punching range, and as he moved into range he'd already begun to throw the punch. So if you waited until he got into range to punch back, he beat you every time." Floyd Patterson said, "It's very hard to hit a moving target, and Ali moved all the time, with such grace, 3 minutes of every round for 15 rounds. He never stopped. It was extraordinary." Darrell Foster, who trained Will Smith for the movie Ali, said, "Ali's signature punches were the left jab and the overhand right. But there were at least 6 different ways Ali used to jab. One was a jab that Ali called a snake lick, like cobra striking, that comes from the floor almost, really low down. Then there was Ali's rapid-fire jab, 3 to 5 jabs in succession rapidly fired at his opponent's eyes, to create a blur in his face so he wouldn't be able to see the right hand coming behind it." In the opinion of many, Ali became a different fighter after the 3.5-year layoff. Freddie Pacheco, Ali's corner physician, noted that he had lost his ability to move and dance as before. This forced Ali to become more stationary and exchange punches more frequently, exposing him to more punishment, while indirectly revealing his tremendous ability to take a punch. This physical change led in part to the rope-a-dope strategy, where Ali would lay back on the ropes, cover up to protect himself and conserve energy, and tempt opponents to punch themselves out. Ali often taunted opponents in the process and lashed back with sudden, unexpected combinations. The strategy was dramatically successful in the George Foreman fight, but less so in the first Joe Frazier bout, when it was introduced. Of his later career, Arthur Mercanti said, "Ali knew all the tricks. He was the best fighter I ever saw in terms of clinching. Not only did he use it to rest, but he was big and strong, and knew how to lean on opponents, and push, and shove, and pull to tire them out. Ali was so smart. Most guys are just in there fighting, but Ali had a sense of everything that was happening." almost as though he was sitting at ringside analyzing the fight while he fought it. Talking trash. Ali regularly taunted and baited his opponents, including Liston, Frazier, and Foreman, before the fight, and often during the bout itself. Ali's pre-fight theatrics were almost always highly entertaining, although his words were sometimes cutting and unfair, and were largely designed to promote the fight. But his antics were often based on an unerring sense of a particular psychological trigger or vulnerability in his opponent that would provoke a reaction and cause the opponent to lose focus. Frazier was too dumb to be champion. He would whip Liston like his daddy did. Terrell was an Uncle Tom. Patterson was a rabbit. Ali was a master of provocation, and he had a clear understanding that what one did to an opponent outside the ring could be even more crucial than what one did to him in the ring. In speaking of how Ali stoked Liston's anger and overconfidence before their first fight, one writer commented that the most brilliant fight strategy in boxing history was devised by a teenager who had graduated 376 in a class of 391. Ali typically portrayed himself as the people's champion, and his opponent as a tool of the white establishment, despite the fact that his entourage often had more white faces than his opponents. During the early part of Ali's career, he built a reputation for predicting rounds in which he would finish opponents, often vowing to crawl across the ring or to leave the country if he lost the bout. Ali admitted he adopted the latter practice from Gorgeous George Wagner, a popular professional wrestling champion in the Los Angeles area, who drew thousands of fans to his matches as the man you love to hate. ESPN columnist Ralph Wiley called Ali the king of trash talk. The Guardian recently lamented the decline of the golden age of trash talking in boxing, which, it said, was exemplified by Muhammad Ali. The Bleacher Report called Clay's description of Sonny Liston smelling like a bear and his vow to donate him to a zoo after he beat him the greatest trash talk line in sports history. Legacy. As Mrs. Lonnie Ali looks on, President George W. Bush embraces Muhammad Ali after presenting him with the Presidential Medal of Freedom on November 9, 2005, during ceremonies at the White House. Muhammad Ali defeated every top heavyweight in his era, which has been called the golden age of heavyweight boxing. Ali was named Fighter of the Year by Ring Magazine more times than any other fighter, and was involved in more Ring Magazine Fight of the Year bouts than any other fighter. He is an inductee into the International Boxing Hall of Fame, and holds wins over 7 other Hall of Fame inductees. He is one of only 3 boxers to be named Sportsman of the Year by Sports Illustrated. In 1978, 3 years before Ali's permanent retirement, the Board of Aldermen in his hometown of Louisville, Kentucky, voted 6-5 to rename Walnut Street to Muhammad Ali Boulevard. This was controversial at the time, as within a week 12 of the 70 street signs were stolen. Earlier that year, a committee of the Jefferson County Public Schools considered renaming Central High School in his honor, but the motion failed to pass. At any rate, in time, Muhammad Ali Boulevard and Ali himself came to be well accepted in his hometown. In 1993, the Associated Press reported that Ali was tied with Babe Ruth as the most recognized athlete out of over 800 dead or alive athletes in America. The study found that over 97% of Americans over 12 years of age identified both Ali and Ruth. He was the recipient of the 1997 Arthur Ashe Courage Award. 2 years later, in 1999, the BBC produced a special version of its annual BBC Sports Personality of the Year award ceremony, and Ali was voted their Sports Personality of the Century, receiving more votes than the other 4 contenders combined. On September 13, 1999, Ali was named Kentucky Athlete of the Century by the Kentucky Athletic Hall of Fame in ceremonies at the Galt House East. On January 8, 2005, Muhammad Ali was presented with the Presidential Citizens Medal by President George W. Bush. Later that November, he received the Presidential Medal of Freedom at a White House ceremony. and the Otto Hahn Peace Medal in Gold of the Association of Germany, DGVN, in Berlin, for his work with the U.S. Civil Rights Movement and the United Nations, December 17, 2005. The Muhammad Ali Center, alongside Interstate 64 on Louisville's riverfront. On November 19, 2005, Ali's 19th wedding anniversary, the $60 million nonprofit Muhammad Ali Center opened in downtown Louisville. In addition to displaying his boxing memorabilia, the center focuses on core themes of peace, social responsibility, respect, and personal growth. A youth club in Ali's hometown, and a species of rose, Rosa Ali, have been named after him. On June 5, 2007, he received an honorary Doctorate of Humanities at Princeton University's 260th graduation ceremony. He also received an honorary citizenship of Bangladesh in February 1978. Ranking in heavyweight history. Ali is generally considered to be one of the greatest heavyweights of all time by boxing commentators and historians. Ring Magazine, a prominent boxing magazine, named him number 1 in a 1998 ranking of greatest heavyweights from all eras. Ali was named the second greatest fighter in boxing history by ESPN.com, behind only welterweight and middleweight great Sugar Ray Robinson. In December 2007, ESPN listed Ali second in its choice of the greatest heavyweights of all time, behind Joe Louis. The Associated Press voted Ali the number 1 heavyweight of the 20th century in 1999. In the media and popular culture. Pop art painting of Muhammad Ali by John Stango. As a world champion boxer and social activist, Ali has been the subject of numerous books, films, and other creative works. In 1963, he released an album of spoken word on Columbia Records titled I Am the Greatest. He has appeared on the cover of Sports Illustrated on 37 different occasions, second only to Michael Jordan. He appeared in the documentary film Black Rodeo, 1972, riding both a horse and a bull. His autobiography The Greatest, My Own Story, written with Richard Durham, was published in 1975. In 1977 the book was adapted into a film called The Greatest, in which Ali played himself and Ernest Borgnine played Angelo Dundee. When We Were Kings, a 1996 documentary about the Rumble in the Jungle, won an Academy Award, and the 2001 biopic Ali garnered an Oscar nomination for Will Smith's portrayal of the lead role. The latter film was directed by Michael Mann, with mixed reviews, the positives given to Smith's portrayal of Ali. Prior to making the film, Smith rejected the role, until Ali requested that he accept it. Smith said, "The first thing Ali told him was, 'Man, you're almost pretty enough to play me.'" Ali had a cameo role in the 1962 film version of Requiem for a Heavyweight, and during his exile, he starred in the short-lived Broadway musical Buck White, 1969. The film Freedom Road, made in 1978, features Muhammad Ali in a rare acting role as Gideon Jackson, an ex-slave in 1870s Virginia, who gets selected to the U.S. Senate in Washington, D.C., and battles other former slaves and white sharecroppers to keep the land they have tended all their lives. Ali and Michelle, 1979. On the set of Freedom Road, Ali met Canadian singer/songwriter Michelle, and subsequently helped create Michelle's album entitled The First Flight of the Griselda Dragon. For contributions to the entertainment industry, Ali was honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame at 6801 Hollywood Boulevard. Ali recorded the song Stand By Me in 1964. The Muhammad Ali effect is a term used in psychology that was named after him when he stated, "I only said I was the greatest, not the smartest," in his autobiography The Greatest, My Own Story. According to this effect, when people are asked to rate their intelligence and moral behavior in comparison to others, people will rate themselves as more moral, but not more intelligent than others. The Trials of Muhammad Ali, a documentary directed by Bill Siegel which focuses on Ali's refusal to serve during the Vietnam War, opened in Manhattan on August 23, 2013.